Alright, so I guess what's been coming up a little bit more lately with the upcoming release of the Battlefield 6 reveal trailer that's supposed to come out in June. Uh, Most of you guys that follow me and actually know me as a player will know that I was primarily a Battlefield player for a super long time. I still play the game a lot now, but generally my roots are in the Battlefield franchise. So this also comes into play with like sort of the content that I'm doing and the shit that I might want to post. You know, I've had people ask me on stream, are you going to play BF6? And then you have to go into all this other stuff about, there's a lot to talk about there, right? Because unfortunately, as with most FPS games, we're just absolutely cursed right now. So in order to talk about Battlefield 6 and the likelihood of playing it, I think it's important that you kind of have to talk about Battlefield as a series in general. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. So, yeah, you kind of have to talk about the relevant history of the series in general. And what I'm categorizing as relevant history is basically Battlefield 3 and up to the current date. So Battlefield 3, I think, was around like 2010, 2011-ish, somewhere in there. Maybe around 2012, somewhere in that general time frame. And you know, if you'd never played, so I'm someone who's played pretty much every Battlefield game that has ever existed. So like the original Battlefield game that was on PC back in the day, like I think it was in the very early 2000s. You know, I was online playing that game, and those games were on an engine called Refractor, which the gameplay, if you compare it to now, like the gameplay was really shit. Like people were bullet sponges, like the netcode was dog shit, but that's what we had to play back in the day, so that's what we played with. So anyway, Battlefield 3 was like the first really commercially successful and mass appeal Battlefield game. So it's very hard to find a like avid FPS player who doesn't have like Battlefield 3 type memories and stuff. We all have our favorite memories from that game. Now that game did have its own problems. Most of them stem from systems that were kind of newer to the series, I guess. There was kind of a gunplay design problem in that game too, but that's not really for this video. I can, if you want to talk about that, we can go into that in another video. But anyway, yeah, Battlefield 3 was like the first real commercially successful game for the franchise. It had mass appeal. Like you had millions and millions of fucking people playing that game, right? So that was super popular. And then you have Battlefield 4, which was the spiritual successor to that game, which was, again, a modern time frame setting game that tried to make improvements on Battlefield 3. Unfortunately, at its release, it was super marred with technical issues. The netcode was absolutely fucking dog shit at the beginning of that game. Just had a lot of problems, and it pushed a lot of people away early, but eventually they figured it out. They did a bunch of shit and pretty much solved most of the problems with that game, and even to this day it's still considered a really good entry to the series. Now after Battlefield 4 is kind of where you get into the situation where people start kind of not liking the direction that the games are going. So after Battlefield 4 you had Battlefield Hardline, was basically like the cops and robbers version of Battlefield. I thought it was actually really enjoyable and really fun. It was something a little different, a little bit fresh. And it wasn't just, we're not doing modern military combat shit. It was just something a little bit different. And like the weapons in the game had really barely any fall off. Like you had weapons in that game that didn't start falling off till 40, 45 meters, like ARs and stuff. That was something that I wasn't used to, because I'd been playing games where you start to have this massive range fall or damage fall off, 10, 15, 20 meters, as is pretty common in most games now. But that game, you could shoot people out to really far, and it felt really good. But that game had really bad balance concerns. They took a long time to address like obvious balance problems. Like there was a fucking gun in that game, specifically the K10, which was a 1200 rate of fire SMG that fired 45 caliber weapons. So if you know anything about Battlefield, usually the damage is caliber based. So in terms of like 45 caliber, a 45 caliber bullet in Battlefield, most Battlefield games was a 3-shot kill. I think it's still the same. But yeah, imagine getting shot by a fucking 1200 rate of fire SMG. That's a 3-shot kill, and it didn't really appreciably. The thing about like fall off with those kind of guns is, if it's any way accurate at all, like it doesn't matter how bad the fall off is, because the rate of fire is so high and your hit rate is so good that, you know, it just melted people. And that thing was broken as fuck for a long time. And I think that was one of the, like, and you know, with meta weapons, like, everybody's using it, right? So all that game ended up being was K10 spam all the time, forever. So it kind of ruined the game for me, that's for sure. But I did play it a fair amount. I had my fun with it, despite its flaws. And then you had Battlefield 1. And Battlefield 1 was, again, for me, like, probably, you know, it strikes people sometimes that it's one of my favorite games in the series, but they actually took, you know, there was a lot of fresh things in that game for the series, right? You still had suppression, which is completely awful. It had some game design in terms of gunplay that was a little bit different. More notably, the SMGs had what is called SIPS FSM, which is spread increase per shot, first shot multiplier. So what you had in older Battlefield games, specifically BF3 and BF4, is you had pretty much what turned out to be like a microburst meta with the gun. So it didn't matter what gun you had, it didn't matter how many guns were in the game nominally, right? You just picked like one of the highest rate of fire guns, and you just microbursted it, and your spread reset was so fast that you could just microburst out to insane ranges, and you really only had to use a couple guns. You see a little bit of this in PlanetSide, because it does have that really insanely fast spread reset, like in terms of like 1 millisecond. So that's kind of a thing where you run into problems with that type of gunplay, because at the end of the day, you know, you can just microburst everything, and it becomes really bland and stupid, and there's only, you know, a handful of guns used in the entire game, like, that are meta. Yeah, so what Battlefield 1 did to try to combat that was they added, like I said before, the spread increase per shot, first shot multiplier mechanic, whereas as you would fire your gun on the first shot, you had the regular spread increase per shot. So for you PlanetSide guys, it's commonly called cone of fire, but in every other fucking game, nobody calls it cone of fire, okay? It's called spread, so that's what I'm going to refer to it as. So as you fire, if you tried to microburst your gun, what would happen is you had a massive first shot multiplier, specifically on SMGs. So if you continued to microburst, or try to microburst, you would keep accumulating that first shot multiplier for every time you tried to microburst it. And for people that had played in a specific manner with the gunplay of the game for, you know, the past 3 fucking games, it kind of pissed people off, because they just wanted to pick up their mindless, brainless M16A3 and AEK 971s, the really high rate of fire guns, and just microburst everything, kill everybody at every range, because that's the most brain dead thing to do and the easiest thing to do. So people were not very upset, or people were very upset with that specific change to the gunplay. I liked it because it kind of tried to get away from this stupid meta that had evolved over the past few games, and it made you actually, like, you had to wait a much longer amount of time for your spread to reset with this new system. So microbursting was essentially dead. So with all that said, that was the SMG gunplay mechanics. The LMGs had a weird, like, inverse spread design, whereas you would start, like, you would initially have a super accurate shot followed by a little bit of inaccuracy, and then the longer you fired, the tighter your cone would get to maintain your quote-unquote perfect accuracy. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it in terms of, like, using a machine gun. And for those of you guys who have never shot, like, a machine gun or used one IRL, it kind of really makes sense in terms of realism. And now I'm not someone who advocates for realism in gameplay, because usually it's realism in gameplay in FPS games specifically is kind of cringe, and it leaves open a lot of room for people to put a bunch of stupid shit into games. I mean, at the end of the day, they're video games, and when you try to put realism into video games, it usually doesn't ever really work out that well for the fun aspect of playing a game. But anyways, so those were the LMG mechanics. They're kind of boring to use, but they didn't function like regular weapons, and it was something new, right? So you had SLRs, which were the self-loading rifles, you know, like the DMRs, the battle rifles that you would normally see. And those had regular, you know, recoil and spread, so nothing too drastic there. And then you had the snipers, which had, you know, they did a decent amount of damage, right? But depending on which sniper you used, it had a sweet spot to where if you were in a particular, if your target was at a particular range, you would score a one-shot kill on the body shot. Now, I fucking hate snipers in video games, but I thought at least, like, a lot of people, I'll argue with some people with this, like, getting one shot by snipers in a video game is very cringe, especially if it's a body shot. But at least they tried to make, like, whoever was fucking thinking, whoever was using the sniper rifle, like, it gave them, you know, your sniper rifle could be way more powerful if you just applied, like, 10% brain power. Unfortunately, in the Battlefield community, it's a lot like the Planetside community. It's full of absolute fucking retards who even with, like, the minimum skill gate of having a one-shot kill body shot weapon, just by, like, comparing, like, what range you were at to shooting someone, like, all the fucking flags in Battlefield have a range marker on them, you know, compared to where you are. So you could easily sit outside the burn and map out, you know, where you were going to stand and just fucking one-shot people that are fighting on the point. If that point happens to not have a lot of cover on the point and cover outside the point. So you could have all that, but again, the players were too stupid, okay? So they just want brainless fucking everything, and it really didn't get any more brainless than they already were based on the design, but they were actually too stupid to even use that design. So you had a lot of people, you know, as I mentioned before, there were people used to shooting the guns the way they shot them in the previous few games. So a lot of people were butthurt, and they wanted to go back to having the brainless fucking microburst everything and just pick AEK or M16A3 and just go, never use any other gun ever. So there was a lot of whining. There were some gameplay issues. Like, in terms of, like, aesthetic, I think that game really pulled off the World War I aesthetic really well. Like, a lot of them, some of my favorite maps are in that game. In general, like, I think Battlefield 1 is probably very close to being one of my favorite Battlefield games, and I definitely think I'm in the minority when it comes to that. But if you ask a normie about that game, normies hate that game, but, like, autistic nerds like me and some of my friends, we love that game. So anyway, yeah, there was a kind of malaise with Battlefield 1. People weren't too happy with it. They hated a lot of things about it. So then you move on to Battlefield fucking 5. So Battlefield 5 was going to go, you know, Battlefield 1 was World War 1. Battlefield 5 was going to be a World War 2 shooter. Now, I know everyone has played fucking World War 2 shooters forever, and they're tired and sick to death of them, but I guess we hadn't really had, like, a real, like, modern World War II game on the Frostbite engine. So people were excited for that. So they had a closed beta and then an open beta. I played in the open beta. I don't think I got in the closed beta, but I played in the open beta, and the gunplay was pretty tight. Probably some of the best gunplay that the series ever had at the beginning of BF5, I think. So what ended up changing from Battlefield 1 with its spread-based model of gunplay to Battlefield 5 was a change in, so instead of, like, if you fire your gun, and this happens in Planetside too, so if you fired your gun, you had a geometric cone, or a cone that fucking your bullets could hypothetically go in. Now, you know, this is put in games to limit the effect of a specific weapon at a certain range, right? There's a really good, like, there's a video that I might link down in the description that goes over how that works and how that looks and what that kind of design is meant to do in an FPS game. Because some people think that, you know, spread is the worst thing ever, and it's just anti-skill and all this shit. Well, it's really not. It actually is more skill that you have to account for that and put that into thinking about your engagements. So if anything, it's actually more skillful to have it in the game than some game that just has no spread. Like, you know, I'm talking like Battlefront 2, all this shit. So anyway, the people whined and bitched and complained because they're ignorant about spread in BF1, and they harassed everybody until it was decided that Battlefield 5 would go from basically, you know, spread being your main source of inaccuracy to a recoil-based system. So you'll have basically spread still existed in the game, but your recoil would always be what caused your inaccuracy before spread ever would. Spread was really like kind of a thing that would limit your effectiveness at really long ranges. This is really the only time you would notice it. But you would generally always notice that your recoil of the barrel of your gun was off somewhere before you would ever notice the spread. And I guess that was supposed to make people happy, but I mean, I've always kind of thought, like, you know, what's the difference between watching my bullets go somewhere different in a cone and watching my barrel move my gun and jerk my gun around? Like, horizontal recoil is some of the worst shit that you can have in FPS games. It's unlike vertical recoil, unless it's a consistent pull in a general direction. If it's this random shit where your gun is just bouncing around horizontally, that's really fucking hard to control. And unless you have a macro or you're a fucking robot, like, you can't reliably control that shit. So you had the introduction of this really awful horizontal fucking dog shit recoil system in Battlefield 5. And it was really apparent on a lot lower rate of fire guns. Because you can, as you can probably imagine, like, if you're shooting a lower rate of fire gun, you tend to experience that horizontal recoil more, in my opinion. Or that's generally how it's felt to me. Whereas if you're firing a high rate of fire gun, you know, your gun might be jittering back and forth, but at least, like, you're kind of all in the same area and you're still getting a lot of shots on target. Whereas with the lower rate of fire, it's like it just feels much worse. So yeah, the gunplay in the beta was really good initially. So then the game came out. And I think it ended up getting delayed, I think, by a month. So it ended up coming out like in one of the last couple weeks of November that year. I don't remember specifically what year it was, but yeah, so it came out. There weren't really that many maps. There wasn't much content initially because the game was advertised, you know, it was going to be a live service content type of game, which is an excuse. Now, I think developers use that shit as an excuse to just trickle content, basically, and just to give you unfinished ideas and design ideas and systems and put into a game and just say, oh, well, we're going to work on it later because it's a live service game. That, to me, is bullshit, and I don't like that because it kind of gives an out for these guys to, you know, kind of just half-ass everything they go through and know they have some kind of, like, time or, like, you know, this game is going to last a while, so we have a long time to get it right. Whereas other games that aren't like that, you know, you kind of have to work on it, iterate on it, and get it done and get it right, like, in a certain amount of time. Whereas these guys with the fucking live service shit, they just think they have fucking forever. So what ends up happening in those games is you always have shit that's completely broken forever, and it just never gets fixed. So I'm definitely not a fan of the live games as a live service model. So, yeah, so there was a lot of, despite the gunplay being good initially, a lot of other shit in the game sucked ass. So you had, the visibility in the game was absolutely fucking terrible. Like, I've heard, the best description I've ever heard of Battlefield 5 is a perverse eye exam, which is basically what it is. And part of that is that there is a fucking forced TAA, which is a method of anti-aliasing that pretty much makes it look like there's someone sprayed Vaseline all over your fucking screen. So that looks like shit, and it makes it hard to see. In terms of visibility, too, everything is, like, ultra realistic. There's not really, like, you see in PlanetSide, like, pink camo and all that shit. You know, everybody's wearing, like, era-relevant uniforms. So, you know, if you're a German soldier, you have gray fucking 255. It just so happens that most of the fucking backgrounds that you're on always completely match your fucking soldier. So constantly you're in the situation as an FPS player, you know, trying to gun people. You're like, is that a fucking dude? Is that a fucking dude? Is that a fucking dude? And it's like the visibility aspect of the game became such a critical problem where everybody's a gray 255 soldier on a gray 255 background that it started to bleed over into other aspects of the game. So what you ended up having happen is people all of a sudden were like, oh my god, I'm getting shredded. I'm dying so fast. What they didn't realize was, you know, in most games, you're able to acquire your target, you engage in the gunfight, and if you die, you die, right? But it's in a lot of cases, for a lot of bad players and a lot of even good players in that game, is you can't see where anyone is. You can't see players. And something else to mention is that they removed 3D spotting. So 3D spotting was something that had been in Battlefield games for a super long time, but I guess I've got a bigger complaint that ultimately what all this bullshit, this like tactical realism shit came from, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But so you have no 3D spotting. Everybody blends in with every fucking background. And people are getting lasered. And, you know, part of this has to do with, well, we did away pretty much with spread, and now you have mostly recoil-based stuff, but it was actually really fucking easy to use. Like, the inaccuracy of the guns was almost down to nothing. You know, because everybody wanted to play with laser beams. So, guess what you get when you have a game where nobody can see each other and everybody has a laser beam for a fucking weapon with no inaccuracy, is you get a fucking game where everybody's getting lasered all the time. So, people were mistakenly calling out, you know, the time to kill is fine, but the time to death is really shitty. Well, another thing that had to do with this time of death thing was the netcode was one of the fucking worst netcodes we've had since the launch of Battlefield 4. Like these constant one frames from fucking weapons that literally mathematically cannot one frame you. It was mostly on lower rate of fire guns. But every gunfight or engagement, you know, you had the potential to get one framed by a gun that mathematically can't fucking one frame you. So it's super frustrating to play. So you have all this shit. You have the visibility concerns. You have the netcode being complete dog shit. Most of the maps in the game were completely, I don't know who, like, we're getting to the point now in a lot of games where, you know, every map has to be like an artist rendition. It was not like considered how it would play out in terms of you know, if you're an FPS player trying to shoot guys. It's always about, well, how pretty can we look? How many doodads can we put here? How beautiful can we make this scene? How photorealistic can we make the map we're playing on? Which, I mean, that's all fine at the end of the day if you're making a fucking single player game. But at the end of the day, when you're making a fucking multiplayer shooter game in a franchise as relevant and as important as Battlefield is, you fucked up. So, let's see, what else here? The game had really fucking bad performance. Like, even for the time, I had a pretty good computer, and like, my shit chugged, especially on certain maps. Like, you're talking like 80 to 120 FPS max. So we're talking like that's not good. As you know, I'm someone that plays with high refresh monitor, and I love to play on high frame rates because it's great and it feels great. So with the fucking frame rate that you had in that game, you also have the input lag that comes with it, and throw that on the other shit. It's just rough. Okay, what else do we have here? We have the content trickle. So when the game first came out, you know, I already kind of talked about this with the live service bullshit. But the content trickle was so fucking bad. Like, it took them so long, and the game was delayed. So it took them fucking forever to put in new maps that we needed, and then when they did it, they would put in one map, and it was, like, not very good, and it wasn't, maybe it was balanced for one type of game mode, but you have to remember that they have to work on the map and design the map to play in multiple game modes, and that's a real fucking crapshoot for these guys, especially in the last few games. You know, one map might be super ultra really playable in one game mode, but it, you know, whoever thought about it on the other game mode or did a real piss poor job at it, right? So you have that to contend with. everything was relatively like bland in terms of cosmetics, really like uninteresting, like super. It just felt like they were doing shit just to get it out there, right? So everything was super generic. There was nothing you really wanted. Like a lot of the stuff you could get from assignments and everything, like stuff you could do in game. So you have that aspect of it. Another thing that kept it from not selling well right off the get-go was one of the fucking, I forget who it was. I think his last name is Berlin. But when the trailer came out, the trailer was a big fucking fiasco because it was nothing but like cybernetic women and shit with like bionic fake arms in World War II environment. It was totally over the top. And Dice Sweden pushed this whole narrative of like identity politic fucking horse shit that just invades every space now. I don't know if you know anything about me personally, but I think identity politics is complete fucking garbage. It's divisive and it's unproductive. So, but I wasn't going to determine whether or not I bought the game based on that alone, because I believe it or not, I'm not that shallow. So there was that whole thing, you know, one of the lead guys on the fucking game that stemmed from that, because they were getting a lot of backlash from that trailer and everything, and how, you know, we're having fucking all these women in a World War II game. I mean, if you actually go and play the game now, you're playing a World War II game, and you hear nothing but fucking women screaming all the time. And for me, that isn't going to keep me from playing the game, but for a lot of people, like, the authenticity of like the World War II environment, that really pissed a lot of people off. So naturally there was some blowback for that. And the Berlin guy, he was like, well, if you don't fucking like it, then don't buy it. And believe me, the people took that to heart because they did not buy that shit. I saw a stat as of a couple weeks ago that Battlefield 5 took over 2 years to sell as many copies as Battlefield 1 sold on launch day. So that should tell you something. So when he told those people that if they don't like it, not to buy it, they took that shit to heart and they didn't buy it. You know, another reason why the game, I was talking about content drip. For fucking content drip, you had barely any content, and then, you know, maybe a year into the game, nobody was buying the fucking game, so they just were like, okay, fuck this. The investors are pulling the fuck out because we made a massive mistake here. And I haven't even gotten to the real reason why the fucking game was unfun to play. Or a bunch of other stuff. That's how much of a fucking disaster that this game was. But, yeah, the content drip, you stopped getting content because they pulled the plug on the fucking game a year into it. So where do we go from here? The game had fucking microtransactions with, like, stupid costumes and shit. If your game's gonna have a bunch of like scummy microtransactions and shit, at least make sure you have a working, playable game first. Which Battlefield 5, as I said before, is a perverse eye exam and a game for a kiosk, you know, like to test on, and that's about it. So from there, like I have a giant list of shit here that I have to keep referring back to because I don't want to forget anything that sucked about this game. We covered the politics, the microtransactions. Okay, one of the main reasons that Battlefield 5 sucked dick was attrition. So I guess we started listening to people on Reddit who are like sub 1 KD losers who suck at every Battlefield game ever invented. And you know who they really hate? They really hate the good player who's a lone wolf and, you know, logs in and plays during the night, and he's gonna fucking... you know, he farms them all because they're all bad, and he hates that player. So you know what we need? We need a more teamwork, tactical-focused game. So how do we do that? How do we encourage teamwork and make teamwork more effective? Well, let's put in the attrition system. And what the attrition system is it is a system in which your health only regens a certain amount, and it will never regen back to full. And in order to regen your health, you have to either go back to a fucking aid station and go on a fetch quest, which is always what you want to do in an FPS game, and pick up one if you've already used the one you have, or you have to rely on one of the medics on your team who are complete and total mouth breathers that don't even care about playing the fucking game to press E on you. Because remember, pressing E is the pinnacle of fucking teamwork in an FPS game, or that's what Battlefield players would have you believe. Apparently, the lead devs of the game also thought that, too. But really, all it does is it punishes anyone who is remotely competent. So what came with health attrition was ammo attrition. So, you know, gone are the days of having a full combat load, like in Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4. You know, full combat load is your 7 magazines of ammo for whatever gun you have. Well, guess what? You get fucking the magazine that's in your fucking gun, and you get one other magazine. Okay? So if you want ammo and run out of ammo, you either have to pick up what paltry amount that people give you when you kill them and you run over their bodies, because apparently we're playing like some fucking weird RPG game now. Or you rely on, well, there's a few ways. So you either pick it up from the people that you killed, you know, but you don't get very much. Or you can go to do a fetch quest and get your ammo from the supply box. Or have one of the teammates who never plays support be sentient enough to throw you fucking ammo or put down an ammo box. Which, by the way, Battlefield players are fucking horrible, and they don't even do that. So what you had here was this forced team play where you had to rely on people who don't care, or bad game mechanics in general that take you out of the action, to go make some weird fucking milsim roleplay experience that no one fucking wanted except 10 people on Reddit. So that made the game extremely unfun to play, because even with playing with friends, like your squad comp is limited. Like, you know, you have a medic. If you only have you and 2 other guys, if you have a fucking assault player and a medic player, then, you know, you can run around with the assault guy and he can get healed to full, but he's gonna run out of fucking ammo. So that's no good. So if you want to be like an anti-tank guy and you're an assault player and you're playing with your fucking support player friend, well, that's fine, but you guys are gonna fucking die because he can't heal, since there's no regen in the game. And one of the best arguments I ever heard was, okay, if you want to make a reliance on teamwork, if you want well-paced downtime, which is one of the things I hate hearing a developer say when it comes to an FPS game. If you want well-paced downtime, does a health regen system not already promote this? Because if you get in a gunfight and take damage, and you want to regen your health, you have to fucking chill for a little bit until your health regens. Why is that not an acceptable answer? Why do I have to run back across the map to a fucking supply box and get a health pack on a fetch quest? Or, God forbid, wait for one of my Down syndrome teammates to remember that he's playing the medic class and press a fucking button on his keyboard to heal me. Because they don't do it. They're brain dead. So anyway, attrition is awful. Absolutely awful. And forced team play with people who don't care about playing the game is absolute cancer. And I don't wish it on anybody. But for me, that was one of the biggest problems with the game. Attrition was absolutely awful. There's stuff out there where the attrition system never passed through internal playtesting. So the user experience and all that shit, when it came time to playtest that stuff, that shit never passed internally. But the game design, or the lead devs in that game, were like, fuck it. This is the way we want to go. This is what we're doing. So that's what they did. And it was a complete and fucking total disaster. And it made the game unfun for anyone who happened to be good. Because as you know, or you could logically deduce, that attrition doesn't affect the worst players in the game. It doesn't affect bad players. Because bad players don't live long enough to fucking ever run out of ammo. Bad players only live and maybe survive one gunfight, and then who cares? They have one health pack. That's it. They don't go on prolonged streaks. They just die. So the people the system is fucking designed to entertain and make them deal with, it ultimately ends up being anyone who happens to be good. So it's a huge fucking system to punish people who are actually good at the fucking game. And it does not even remotely affect the worst players in the game. You know, who it's designed for, who wanted it in the first place. So a huge misstep there. Let's see. We have animations for absolutely everything. Everything has to have a one-to-one animation. Every fucking action in the game. Which, you know, it just gets clumsy. You know, your animators have to do a fucking animation for absolutely every action in the game. It invariably leads to situations where people are in awkward, funky fucking positions where hit reg already was dog shit. So now you have positions where, you know, people are in this janky ass animation, so they're harder to hit. It's just bad all around. Like, I probably talked about how bad the game is and all the stupid design decisions they made for like 20 minutes now. But I'm not even done. So, like I said, the game came out about the third week of November in that year. I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 2019. It could have been 20. I think it was actually 2018. So the game wasn't selling. Within a week, the game was massively discounted. I think up to 40 to 50% in some places. And, you know, that's a result of all the shit I talked about already. Because people didn't like Attrition. People didn't like being told not to buy it. People didn't like the fuck how you couldn't see anything. People were reading the reviews of and watching the players that they like. The game was fucking horrible. So they weren't buying it. So what DICE decided to do about a week or two before Christmas was to, you know, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to modify the gunplay of the game, and we're going to make everyone, I think what they basically did was they increased the time to kill. Which, for whatever reason, I don't know why these people, I know they're smart people, but for some reason, really smart people can't figure out that increasing the time to kill for awful players is never a net positive. It doesn't help bad players when you increase the fucking time to kill. It doesn't. And I would at some point really like to do an entire video debunking this idea that if you just increase the time to kill in absolutely everything, that it somehow makes bad players somehow more effective. I don't know. They're literally just as ineffective with a longer time to kill as they are with a shorter time to kill, except at least in a shorter time to kill, they have enough damage or DPS output to maybe get a kill here or there. Whereas with long time to kill, you know, you're increasing the time it takes to have a successful engagement with a fucking gun. Which these people, I don't know if you noticed or not, are not very good at doing off the rip. So anyway, they did a TTK shift in the game. Because, I guess they thought it would be effective because in Battlefield 1 they did a TTK shift, but in the downward direction. Which made the gameplay much, 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 much better. It was so... You fixed a ton of weapon balance issues that the game had. The game was much more enjoyable to play with that TTK change. But in Battlefield 5, it was the complete opposite. And do you know why? Because they went the opposite way, which is fucking stupid. So what they ended up doing was, you know, people, even normies and casuals were like, it's not the time to kill. It's your netcode is shit and we can't see anybody. But they didn't want to hear it because that was fundamental in the design of their awful, perverse eye exam game. So once you have a dev that has like some kind of ego and his design idea is unchallengeable, you get stupid shit like what they did with that game. So eventually enough crying happened that basically the entire community was against this time to kill change, so they reverted it. Fast forward a little while, but a bunch of stuff happened in between. You know, the content drip is absolutely awful. They're not putting out maps for the game that they should have already, and then they're going to cut all development on it because the game is a massive fucking waste of time. They even had some half-assed Battle Royale shit Firestorm that they put in the game, but it was a piece of shit from the beginning, and it didn't find any real legs, or didn't have any legs. With all that happening, they fucking basically canceled development on the game. But before they did that, one of their last official acts was to try to do another fucking time to kill change. But this time they didn't change the multipliers, they changed a bunch of values on guns. So now you had some guns that were shooting up to fucking 13 body shot kills. So they fucking, you know, the gunplay was, at the end of the day, the gunplay was one of the only positive aspects of the game. You know, before they decided to fuck it up. And they fucked it up quite a few times. But this patch, which was known as 5.2, they completely fucked most of the gun balance in the game. And it was a dog shit, piece of shit patch that never should have been done. And as usual, you know, sometimes it's hard to get Battlefield players to agree on shit. But there multiple times in Battlefield 5, you had all of the community was united against dumb shit that these developers were doing. So they basically fucking kind of semi-soft reverted that change, but they could, as usual with egotistical developers, they can't admit they're ever wrong. So what they ended up doing was like doing a software version. And then they stopped balancing the game because the game was functionally dead. So there's still some like microtransaction stuff that you can do in the game, and I guess they're still doing some little tiny shit here and there, but the game has functionally been dead for about a year and a half or so. So, with all that said, we can see that Battlefield 5 was a massive a critical failure. And that's where we kind of lead into Battlefield 6. So, the trailer is going to be released in June sometime. And my thinking on it is that Battlefield 6 is going to attempt to be a massive overcorrection. I think they see everybody wants the good games back, so everybody's good games are Battlefield 3 and to a lesser extent Battlefield 4. They want those games back, so they're going to pander as hard as they can to that crowd. Unfortunately, most of the talented people that work at DICE, Sweden specifically, they're already gone. They left. Whether it be in protest to the lead developers that they had on Battlefield 5, which drove them into a fucking ditch. Most of the people that understand how to give you a good, fun game to play are no longer working to create Battlefield games. But who you do still have in place are the people that completely and, absolutely fucking destroyed Battlefield 5, from the start. Those people are still around. So that's a problem. Some things they're hyping for the next game. It's going to have 128 player servers. So you're going to have, instead of the maximum for a super long time for Battlefield games, it was a 32 versus 32. So a 64 player server. So what they're aiming to do now, probably in their big conquest game mode, is they're going to have 64 versus 64. Now I probably don't need to tell most of you who follow my channel and listen to me talk about PlanetSide all the time, is that how many guys you put on the screen is a marketing gimmick. At the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter how many people you can put on the screen if your gameplay is shit. And as we see from PlanetSide 2, which has some of the shittiest gameplay that you will ever see in any video game when you reach like critical mass of people that are on the screen, it's a marketing gimmick. You can have a perfectly good game with its 5v5. You can have a perfectly good Battlefield, I think, is perfect as a 64-player game. It doesn't need to have 128 players. And also the problem with 128 players is you have to consider if that game actually launches and it has a good launch and 128 player servers is like actually playable and not a total and complete piece of shit, it'll be one of the greatest technical achievements in a really long time, right? Because if you can find some way to have a 60 tick rate fucking server with 128 people on it, nobody's doing that. You guys, you fucking PlanetSide cocksuckers can fanboy all you want and say that PlanetSide's doing it, but guess what? Those fucking servers are not running at 60 hertz, even with 40 people. So shove that up your ass, PlanetSide fanboys. So yeah, I don't. That whole thing, the player count is a marketing gimmick. It's going to be some massive overcorrection. We're going back to modern times. I think they're going to try to remake like a modern Battlefield 3, but coincidentally, they don't have any of the people that knew what made Battlefield 3 fun in the first place, because all those people are fucking gone. And now you have left is these fucking idiots who thought Attrition, was a good design, or fucking going to a awful RIPS, recoil increase per shot system that was complete cancer and dog shit. So yeah, and then you're going to have to contend with, is there going to be are we going to get rid of the server browser? Are we going to have skill-based matchmaking, which is complete and total fucking cancer? Are we going to have crossplay? I'm fine with console crossplay, play at PS5 playing with the Xbox, but I don't want to play on fucking PC against console players. I don't, because I don't want to play against legalized dev-sanctioned aimbot on fucking controllers. And I don't want any of that shit. I don't want people plugging in controllers to fucking PCs to get a dev-sanctioned aimbot. That's a huge fucking problem with games nowadays. And I just know they're going to do it because every fucking game is doing this. you know, you gotta have crossplay, and it's I don't know, man. So I'm doing a wait and see thing. Like I said, I liked the gunplay in BF5, you know, in the beta, and I was like, but there were too many things that I did not like. So I didn't personally buy the game. I was gifted the game on Origin. So that was the first Battlefield game that I didn't buy since the very first fucking Battlefield game. So I'm going to be waiting to see on Battlefield 6 too. I would like to play. I would like to have a new FPS game that doesn't suck to play. But, you know, I don't think FPS at this point is pretty much dead. Like, you can't have good games. You can't have good games with non-retard developers. Like, it just doesn't happen anymore. So as for Battlefield 6, it's a wait and see for me. If you ask me right now, like, am I gonna buy it? I mean, maybe. I don't know. There's just way too much. Like, people are doing all these leaks and shit. I don't care about leaks. I need to see official shit. The trailer isn't really going to tell you much because it should be canned bullshit. Like, yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say here. I just kind of wanted to lay out, like my thinking on the Battlefield series in general. It's still probably my favorite FPS series that I've ever played. I've basically been playing since the fucking original. And I hate to see... Like, what you see in that game is kind of like a look into what's happening in a lot of other games. It doesn't necessarily have to be FPS games, but it's something I've definitely noticed in PlanetSide. So, yeah, it's just, man, it's rough. And the damage that last game, the damage Battlefield 5 has done to that franchise, you know, I think we'll be lucky to recover from. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to get like a little... I guess it was more of a rant session, but I don't really talk about Battlefield a lot, but Battlefield is kind of important in terms of, like, you know, if you think about it, most of my content is PlanetSide content, and PlanetSide is basically a straight ripoff of fucking a Battlefield game at the end of the day. If once again, PlanetSide fanboys, you can suck my dick if you say that's not the case, but it is objectively and factually the case. That game is a ripoff off of the Battlefield series. But what about PlanetSide 1? Well, PlanetSide 1 was a completely different fucking style of game. So you're wrong. You're wrong there too. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to get that out there. Talk a little bit about BF6 and talk a little bit about the recent history of Battlefield games and why we're in a situation that we are in now with the upcoming game, and a little bit of my thoughts on it. So that's it. See you guys later.